Hello, students. So today we're going to talk about syntax. Earlier before, we talked about morphology and how morphology was used to create words. Now, what do you do with those words once you combine them together? Well, the syntax is talking about how these words are formed in all different languages. And so your brain automatically knows how to put words in a specific order. So we can refer to syntax as sentence patterns of language. So talking about syntax, um, languages consist of many discrete units, and we know that a sentence is valid or a sentence is grammatical based on whether it forms or conforms to our knowledge of syntactic units. So, for example, the question or the statement that we talked about the other day, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. We know that even though that sentence doesn't really mean anything in the English language, it still represents syntactical units. It's still syntactically correct. And how do we know that? It's because we have this inner knowledge of sentence and sentence structure and how things should be categorized in a way. We know what are some words that are more noun-like versus more verb-like versus what's in the adverb, for example, what modifies what, even if we're not familiar with the word. So syntax really determines the arrangement of the words in the sentence. English is a subject verb object order, so is Chinese. Other languages, such as American Sign Language, might be a different kind of order. And then, from knowing what kind of order different languages have, we know how to form sentences in that language. So here's an example from Yoda, and he says, "Name must be your fear before banish it you can." So we know that Yoda's speech is always follows this format. It always follows kind of an object, a subject, and then a verb. So the object would be name must be your fear, and then you would be the subject, and then can would be the verb. So all of Yoda sentences would be this way. If I gave you a sentence and I said I need you to turn it into Yoda speak, you would know exactly what to do. So let's start with our test to try to figure out what are some group of words that form a syntactic unit. Okay, so what naturally goes together and forms sentences together based on your knowledge, your linguistic intuitions about a language. So if you take a sentence called and the sentence that we have here, the child found a puppy. Okay, so try to break this into individual units, right? So try to say, okay, these words go together versus other words go together. So if I took a sentence like the child found a puppy, I would say that the child will probably go together, and then a puppy would probably go together, and then found would probably be another constituent. Okay, so this is how I would break it up. And so before you get into drawing the syntax trees, before you try to figure out, what is a noun or how do you parse this as a verb, for example, it might just be easier to go through and say, okay, these words naturally go together, okay? And how do I know? I have constituency tests, but you can rely on your natural linguistic intuitions if you are a native speaker. I'll show you some examples if you're not a native speaker. But so, for example, the modifies child or a modifies puppy. So you know these words kind of go together. So you already have these linguistic intuitions. You already have this knowledge in your heads about how to form a grammatical sentence. So here are the constituency tests. So before you do any syntax tree, before you draw any syntax tree, it might be easier for you to go through and to figure out, these tests. And if you're ever in doubt, I'm not really sure if these group of words go together, then you can go back and look at these tests. So the first test is if the words can stand alone, they form a constituent, okay? So by standing alone, it means that the group of words go together if you can ask a question and have your answer be whatever the grouping of the words is. So my question would be, what did you find? And the answer, a puppy, right? A non-answer or a non-grammatical answer would be found because found is not a natural constituent, right? It doesn't make sense for me to say, what did you find? And then for someone to answer, found a. It makes better sense for you to go through and say, oh, a puppy. So that's just like a question answer test to try to figure out if something is constituent or not. Another constituency test is you could have a replacement by a pronoun. So we talked about in class how pronouns are substitutes for natural groups such as nouns, right? And if you were to ask, if you replace a constituent, a group of letters with a pronoun, would the sentence still make sense? So, for example, if I asked, where did you find a puppy? And you said, I found him in the park. Then you could easily say, I found a puppy in the park. Where did you find him? So him is a natural replacement for a puppy. And that's how you know that a puppy would be a constituent, because you can replace it with these natural classes of words. Same thing for Rachel found a puppy and Keisha did too, right? So Keisha did what? She found a puppy, right? So you kind of know, what would be these groupings, these natural classes based on these questions. And then the third constituency test would be whether or not they move as a unit. So if the group of units, if the group of words can be moved, then they form a constituent. So take it was, a child found a puppy. You can also see, okay, I'm not really sure if a puppy should go by itself. You can move a puppy to the beginning of your sentence and have it that way. So instead of, puppy found a child, you could also say it was a puppy that the child found. A puppy was found by the child, okay? So these natural classes of words, they move by itself. And you also know that found a does not move. That found a by itself is not a group because it doesn't move. And so as a result, it's not a constituent. So if you're ever in doubt as far as what is a grouping, what's a natural class of words, go through and do these constituency tests. It also might be better, even if you're a native English speaker and you have all these linguistic intuitions, it might be better to go through these tests anyways. Before you go through your trees, because as soon as I see a lot of students who go through and they already start writing on their trees, but they can't explain to me, oh well, this is a natural group of words, right? So it's better to kind of conceptualize the sentence before you start writing your tree. We're going to talk about structural ambiguity here, and in your textbook it also talks about deep structure versus surface structure. So surface structure is what is on the surface, so the words itself. Because as you may know, you might have a sentence, but that sentence can have very different meanings, different lexical ambiguity. So that's structural ambiguity is very different in that. Take a sentence, for example, this will make you cool. If you say that sentence, this will make you cool, there's different meanings to that sentence. It could be, this will make you cool as in I give you a pair of Ray-Bans and you look cool, right? Or if I gave you an ice pack and I said this will make you cool, right? That would be something that's more a lexical ambiguity, which means a different meaning. Structural ambiguity changes the meaning of the sentence entirely. So, for example, if I said, for sale, an antique desk suitable for a lady with thick legs and large drawers. So, this is a sentence that could mean two things. It could mean that there's a desk, right, suitable for a lady, right? And the desk has thick legs and large drawers. Or it could be that you're talking about a lady, and the lady has thick legs and large drawers. So you're really not sure what the meaning is. It's structurally ambiguous. Another example would be, we will oil your sewing machine and adjust tension in your home for $10. $10 is not bad for adjusting tension in your home, right? So that's one meaning, but the other meaning could be that we will do all of these things, adjust tension in the sewing machine, right? And then oil the sewing machine, all for $10. So if you see in the picture here, there's an image of Sherlock seeing the man using binoculars versus Sherlock seeing the man using binoculars. Same surface structure, but different deep structures. How do we know? Because there's different meanings, okay? So in the first picture, Sherlock is using his binoculars to see the man. And the second meaning is Sherlock is seeing a man using binoculars. If you just read the sentence by itself, you would know that you wouldn't know which meaning to interpret, right? You would need to ask more details, ask more information, and so that's why it's structurally ambiguous. And you can see how the different structures are clearly marked. In linguistics, we have what's called a hierarchical structure, right? And this is how we are able to really look at the different meanings and show how the different meanings are portrayed. So, for example, synthetic buffalo hides, right? So, in the two trees that we have here, we have synthetic buffalo hides. On the left, right, synthetic buffalo hides. So it has, if you group these words together, if we say that buffalo hides is a constituent, then we would say, okay, buffalo hides. I'm talking about buffalo hides. And these buffalo hides are synthetic, okay? So if I group buffalo hides together, I'm calling it one entity and I'm describing the entity, so I'm saying it's synthetic. Versus if I just said synthetic buffalo hides and I group synthetic buffalo together, then I'm saying that synthetic buffalo is a constituent and the hides are just a descriptor of the synthetic buffalo. So this deep structure means hides a synthetic buffalo. What is synthetic buffalo? I'm not really sure, like a fake buffalo. But you can tell that there's different meanings depending on how you group your constituents, and some are more logical than others. So the synthetic buffalo hides, I'll probably say that it's buffalo hides that are synthetic versus hides of synthetic buffalo, because what's a synthetic buffalo, right? But in the Sherlock example, if you go back to the Sherlock example, you're not really sure which is which. And of course, Groucho Marx, famous comedian, he said this phrase, "One morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas." How you got in pajamas, I'll never know. So we can see here that there's two different meanings portrayed by the different deep structures. So here's A. A is all under the verb phrase. Verb is shot. D means determiner, but you could also put article. For Anne, we have a noun phrase, an elephant, right? And then we have a prepositional phrase, in my pajamas. So there's prepositional phrase and a noun phrase right here. Here in B, we have one big verb phrase, and the verb phrase fits into another verb phrase and a prepositional phrase. The verb is shot, the noun phrase is an elephant, and then in my pajamas is in a prepositional phrase. So try to figure out which one is which. What does I shot an elephant in my pajamas? What are the different meanings depending on which? So you probably noticed that in my pajamas right here, the prepositional phrase is underneath the noun phrase. So this sentence effectively means that the elephant is literally in his pajamas, right? Whereas this sentence, the prepositional phrase is underneath the verb phrase. So you can, it in my pajamas describes not the elephant, it describes how he shot him. Okay, so even though it's the same surface structure, it has the same, the same words, the same description, it has two very different meanings, and we can portray that using our syntax trees. So this is effectively how you would go through and write your syntax trees. And of course, tomorrow in class, we will practice with them. So, and I think it's better to work with a pencil and paper so you can mess up, so you can, really grasp how to draw a tree. So, from the beginning of your tree, you want to have a sentence. So in the beginning, there's a sentence, so you can just put a big S on your paper, right? And then from the S beget, the S is the puppy played in the garden. So the sentence is the puppy played in the garden. And then from that sentence formed a noun phrase and a verb phrase. Okay, so try to figure out, once you have a sentence and you know what the constituents are, try to figure out how you would split it up into two. Okay, so the puppy played in the garden. What's the noun phrase? What's the verb phrase? I'll give you a hint every time there's a verb phrase for the purpose of this PowerPoint. The verb phrase will always be right after you hit the verb. So the verb is played. That's when you know there's a verb phrase, okay? So I would say the puppy would be your noun phrase, and then played in the garden will be your verb phrase. Okay, so from the sentence, you have an NP and a VP. And normally, because, we're dealing with very basic sentences, your noun phrase will always be on the left and your verb phrase will always be on your right. So the syntax is demonstrated by drawing these phrase structure trees, which show the hierarchical nature of words. You know how words are positioned based on what they modify, based on what they are relative to in your sentence. So let's try to figure out what is a noun phrase, okay? So noun phrase really function as subject or an object of the sentence. So which of these are noun phrases? A bird, B, the red banjo, C, have a nice day, D, with a balloon, E, the woman who was laughing, F, it, G, John, H, went, okay? Try to figure out which ones are noun phrases. So the ones that are noun phrases are A, a bird, B, the red banjo, E, the woman who was laughing, F, it, and G, John. How do we know? Because we also have tests for noun phrases. So here are the tests. You could say who found blank, right? Blank was seen by everyone, or what or who I heard was blank. And all of these noun phrases would fit into the blanks, okay? So who found a bird? The red banjo was seen by everyone. Who or what I heard was the woman who was laughing, right? Have a nice day is not a noun phrase, right? Unless you were talking about like a bumper sticker that said have a nice day, or you had it in quotes, right? With a balloon is not a noun phrase. Who found with a balloon? That's a prepositional phrase, and then went would be a verb. So here are all the parts of speech that we've gone over so far. So just a review, we talked about noun phrases, and this right here is similar to the equations that you probably see in your math class. This is called a set. So in a set, these are all the things that can occur within a noun phrase. So for example, we have an article, there might be an adjective, a noun. A noun phrase can also consist of another noun phrase, a pronoun, a proper noun, or a prepositional phrase. So just to review parts of speech, an article would follow a noun, or sorry, it would precede a noun, but it would modify a noun. So articles, also known as determiners, will be things like the, or an, or a. Adjectives would be things that describe a noun. So these would be things like beautiful or flawless, adjectives that describe your teacher. And then nouns, I'm sure you heard while you're in school that a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea, right? So that's true. It could be. But think of it as a more relational way to other types of speech, other parts of speech. So, for example, if you think of a noun being a person, place, thing, or idea, what about more abstract noun versus something that's a little bit more concrete? So here I have puppies, kittens, or murderers as my nouns. So a noun can really occur with a determiner, so determiner such as an article, right? And then it can take on plurals, right? So anything that's very noun-like in form can take on plurals. So that's how we know puppies is a noun versus like went. Wents isn't, with an S, isn't really considered a noun-like word. A pronoun, as we talked about earlier, is something that replaces, a noun. So he, she, you, they, it, right? And so these are pronouns can replace words. So instead of saying John or Ahmed, you can say he, right? And then, of course, a proper noun are a class of nouns that are usually capitalized, such as the British or the president. And you're talking about specific person in that context. So, proper nouns are tricky because proper nouns you can group as one entity, right? So when you think of, the president, or you think of, let's say like Pokemon Go, right? You could say things like today I Pokemon Go, right? And then yesterday you would say I Pokemon Go'd, right? And that would be how you conceptualize proper nouns in your head. Because you wouldn't say, yesterday I Pokemon went, right? That doesn't really make any sense. Because in your mind, proper nouns are considered to be one entity. All right, so let's go back to our syntax trees, right? So in order to make a noun phrase, you would split it up into your article, which is the, and then puppy, which is a noun. So there we have a noun phrase. Notice that the noun phrase must always consist of a noun. You can have a noun phrase without a noun. So what if you had something like the furry puppy? How would you do that? And how would you do that in this binomial, which means two, right? These two trees. How would you split that up? So you would just do what you did normally. So the would be an article, and then in case you ever try to get to a noun, but there's something else in your way, you can always go back to your noun phrase. Okay, so remember our set of things earlier that can consist of a noun phrase. A noun phrase can always consist of another noun phrase. So a noun phrase can goes into furry, which is an adjective, and then puppy, which is a noun. So there you have it. So every time that you have a noun phrase and there's lots of different articles or lots of different adjectives, you can have as many adjectives as you want, but make sure that you always kind of go split up your noun phrases until you reach the noun. Notice that the tree is always split into two because it's a binomial. Some of the resources that you look online are split up into threes, but just to keep consistent, I would prefer that you have two. So keep drawing your noun phrases until you reach your noun. So here we have the small month-old furry Chinese puppy, right? So what do? We did the same thing we did before. So the is an article, and then you would branch off into another noun phrase, which branches out small as an adjective, another noun phrase, month-old is an adjective, another noun phrase, furry is an adjective, another noun phrase, and then Chinese is adjective followed by another noun. So keep splicing up your noun phrases until you hit the noun. Now let's talk about verb phrases. Verb phrases always contains a verb, but it could contain other categories too, like another noun phrase and a prepositional phrase. So read these and see which are verb phrases. A, saw the clown. B, a cupcake. C, slept. D, smart. E, ate the cake. F, found the cake in the cupboard. Or G, realized the earth was round. Which of these are verb phrases? So I would say these are verb phrases. A, saw the clown. C, slept. E, ate the cake. F, found the cake in the cupboard. And G, realized the earth was round. Okay, so I would say that these are more likely to be verb phrases than nouns. How do I know? Because you can always have constituency tests to figure out what the grouping is, and they always must consist of a verb. I would also accept D if you mean like the kind of antiquated now, but like the spark plug smarted or something like that. But as far as the more modern colloquial meaning, I would probably stick with the ones that are highlighted in red as your verb phrases. Right, so a review of verbs, right? So again, going back to our set, everything within a verb phrase consists of all these different things. So you have an auxiliary, which is like a helping verb, a verb, another verb phrase, a noun phrase can also be in your set, a prepositional phrase, and an adverb. And for the purposes of this lecture, I won't go into adverbial phrases. So a verb, as you probably learned in middle school, is something that you do, right? So you can run, you can ski, you can climb, you can jump, right? So auxiliary verbs are things that can help you attain or complete the action of the main verb. So here I have can, may, should, would, right? So I can run, I can ski, I can climb, I should jump, I would climb, I would ski. So notice that all the auxiliary verbs always precedes verbs. So everything that you have before, the auxiliary verb always occurs before your verbs. And then your adverb The most quintessential way to figure out what an adverb is because it ends in ly. But not all adverbs end in ly. So slowly would be an adverb, right? I ate slowly, I drank slowly. But also again, very, and never are also considered adverbs because they modify something about your verb. So like I skied again, or I never climbed, or I jumped again. So just be careful that even though people say that adverbs end in ly, there are other adverbs out there that don't end in ly, but they still modify the verb. So here we have our subject, right? Our sentence level. So we have our S, and then we have our noun phrase, and noun phrase splits off into an article and a noun, and then we have our verb phrase, okay? So to keep it consistent, we have played, but we know that played is a verb, so we'll say it's a verb. So that's a sentence. The puppy played, right? It has a subject, which is your noun phrase, and a predicate, which is your verb phrase, and then completes an idea or a thought. So the puppy played would be a sentence. If we have something called like the puppy is playing, right? So what is your main verb, and then what is your helping verb, right? We have is playing. I'd probably say is your auxiliary because it helps the verb complete its action, and the verb is playing. So you could also say the puppy may play, the puppy has played, anything that helps to reach the verb reach its action, it would be considered an auxiliary. So we have a sentence, the puppy played happily. So from your verb phrase, you have played, which is your verb, and then happily modifies how you played, so it would be your adverb, right? And so that's how you can split up your verb phrases that way. Next up is your prepositional phrase. So your prepositional phrase can occur in both your noun phrases and your verb phrases. Prepositional phrase, of course, by the name, is generated by a preposition and your noun phrase. Don't forget that there's a noun phrase. The object of a preposition is inherently a noun phrase that goes inside your preposition. So prepositions are very hard to understand, especially if you are a non-native speaker. Prepositions address the actions. Expresses the relationship between the noun and the something about the position or locality with the noun. So. The best way that I remembered prepositions was I was reading my mom's English books when she was trying to learn English, and it was talking about this cat, and it would have this cat like go under the table and have it up the tree, or it would be across the street, and so it shows you the location of the word in relation to the noun. You could also answer the sentence, the squirrel ran blank the tree. Up the tree, down the tree, across the tree, from the tree, right? So these would be your prepositions, up, down, across, into, from, by, which. And so if you have any questions about prepositions, it might be a good idea to just review and try to figure out what parts of speech are what. So here I have the puppy played in the garden, okay, in the garden. And I would say, okay, in the garden, that kind of describes to me where the puppy played. So I would say it's a prepositional phrase, okay. So it's a prepositional phrase. Don't forget a prepositional phrase always splices into a preposition and another noun phrase. And a noun phrase splits off into, of course, your article and your noun, okay. So you have your prepositional phrase. It can be found within the verb phrase. It can also be found in the noun phrase, okay. So if I said the puppy with the toy, the puppy with the toy. So with the toy, right, describes something about the puppy. So I would say that's a prepositional phrase. So the prepositional phrase splits off into a preposition and a noun phrase, and then the would be your article, and then toy would be your noun. So just keep track of where the prepositions are in your sentence. So the last thing to remember for today would be your complementizer phrase. So your complementizer phrase occur when sentences are embedded. So remember one of the first days of class, I talked about how you can have infinite number of sentences because through the process of recursion, you could say multiple things because you can just embed the sentence. So for example, I could say the tea is hot. And I could say, she says the tea is hot. And I could say, he says, she says the tea is hot, and so on and so forth, right? So these are complementizer phrases. So complementizer phrase, all you really need to know is that the complementizer phrase consists of a complement and the sentence. And the complement really starts or introduces the embedded clause. So for this sentence, the professor hopes that the students get phrase structure, right? So the students get phrase structure, that's a sentence by itself. The students would be your subject, right? Your noun phrase, get phrase structure would be your verb phrase. But it's an embedded sentence because there's another noun phrase that occurs. So I don't want you to get tripped up. So the whole sentence, the professor hopes that the students get phrase structure, is one big sentence. However, there's one embedded sentence, which is this: the students get phrase structure. It's also seen in if or whether statements, such as, I don't know whether I should talk about this, right? So I should talk about this is its own sentence. And then I don't know whether I should talk about this, it's another sentence. The professor asked if the students understood the syntax lesson. So the students understood the syntax lesson would be your entire embedded phrase, and then the complement would be if. And then another sentence will be the professor asked if the students understood the syntax lesson. So these are sentences that are within other sentences. So how do you mitigate that? So you start with your sentence, of course, and you split off into your noun phrase and your verb phrase as normal. So the professor, you have, I would group that as a noun phrase, and I would say that the is an article, and then professor's noun, right? Hopes will be your verb, right? But then you have a that, right? So what's that? That is a complement that connects the students get phrase structure. So I have a verb, and then verb goes to a CP. CP is a complementizer phrase, right? Which goes into your complement and starts off a new sentence. So the CP always kind of splits off into a C and an S. And then from your S, you can start over again. So you can go from your sentence to your noun phrase, right? Noun phrase would be the students, so that would be article and then noun, the students. And then your verb phrase would be get phrase structure, so that would be verb, and then your noun phrase. And then phrase structure, depending on if you think it's a entire entity, you could do that, or you could. Or if you wanted to, you could just say it's an adjective and a noun. So that's how you do embedded clauses. It's not as tricky as it seems. It's just trying to figure out, is there another phrase in my sentence that also can stand in for its own sentence? Like, is there an embedded sentence in this sentence, embedded clause in this sentence? So, whether you believe it or not, you've learned all these phrase structure rules so far. You know that a sentence can split off into a noun phrase and a verb phrase. You know that noun phrases can consist of all these different things, right? You know verb phrases can split into these different things. You know prepositional phrases splits off to a preposition and noun phrase. And last but not least, you know that a complementizer phrase splits up to a complement and another sentence. So, that being said, I want you to go and practice with these sentences, okay? And I want you to kind of review over this PowerPoint, go over things that you may or may not understand. I will also post this PowerPoint on Blackboard with the answers so you can cross-reference it, and you can check. And then tomorrow in class, I'll answer any questions you have. I'll give you more examples so you can try to figure out and get in the habit of drawing these phrase structure trees. But when in doubt, always start with your constituent and try to figure out, what is a grouping, what's a natural pair, do your constituency tests. So do this for homework. Do these sentences and then compare your answers with the homework that I'll post, the homework answers that I'll post, and then we will talk more about it and practice more tomorrow in class.